In my opinion, Strategist is the most fun role in Marvel Rivals. There's no other role in the game where I feel like I'm able to have as much influence on the course of the match, and I feel like there's so much potential to the role. That being said, it can be a hard role to learn. Not only are you the primary target for the enemy team, but you also bear the responsibility of keeping everyone else alive while still finding time to put in damage of your own. There's definitely a lot to do, and it can be a bit overwhelming at times, but don't worry, I'm here to help. My name is Booney, I'm a Celestial Strategist main, and this is episode 2 in my Support Masterclass series, where I aim to teach you about all the fundamentals of the Strategist role in Marvel Rivals. This video totally works as a standalone, but episode 1 lays some of the foundations for what I'm going to be talking about throughout this series, so go watch that after this if you haven't already. Today, I want to dive deeper into the role of the Strategist and what their function is on the team. By the end of this video, you should have a better sense of what general mindset you need to have when playing Strategist, which characters you should learn based on your playstyle, and how to maximize your value during team fights. For this guide, I'm going to assume that you're brand new to the role of Strategist and to hero shooters in general. I know that probably isn't the case for many of you, but I want to make sure I'm laying out the basics for everyone regardless of previous experience. If you think I missed anything, feel free to leave tips of your own in the comments below. If we all combine our collective knowledge, I'm sure that everyone will be able to finish this video having learned something new. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the Strategist role, I want to make sure we have a baseline understanding of the core responsibilities of each role in the game so we know what we're working with. First off, we have Vanguards. These durable tanks have the ability to stand out in the front line or dive deep into the enemy backline and soak up large amounts of damage from the enemy. Their main job is to apply pressure and create space to enable the rest of the team to push forward safely and get picks. Next, we have Duelists. These are often squishier heroes that are able to put out high amounts of damage. They use the space and pressure created by the tanks to land key picks on the enemy team. Finally, we have the Strategists. As the only role with reliable access to healing, their job is to keep the team alive. Besides that though, Strategists are able to assist in many other ways through the utility they provide. Each role in the game is incredibly important, and without each of them, the team cannot win. A team without tanks cannot create space, a team without DPS cannot land picks, and a team without supports wouldn't be able to stay alive. With all that out of the way, let's talk about one of the first decisions all new Strategist players need to make when loading up the game for the first time. Who do I choose to play? This is a decision based on a variety of factors. It could just be who you think looks the most fun, who you think is meta right now, or even who you just personally vibe with the most. Whatever method you choose, there's no right or wrong answer. I think there's a way to make pretty much every character in this game work. There are considerations to make when you start thinking about team composition, but that's a discussion for next episode. Today, I want to focus on you and picking the hero or heroes that you want to learn and master. Because I have no control over your personal opinions on who you think looks the coolest or feels the most fun, I'm going to stick to presenting you a series of options based on the playstyle of each character, and you can make a decision as to whether you like them or not. As a disclaimer, I'll be highlighting characters that I believe to be good at certain jobs, but that doesn't mean other characters cannot also do those jobs if played right. Getting started, do you want to be able to heal without needing to worry about perfect aim? Try playing Rocket Raccoon, Cloak and Dagger, Adam Warlock, or Mantis. While these characters do certainly have aspects of their kit that require aim, you won't need to worry about missing heals on your team just because you don't have pinpoint accuracy. Adam Warlock, Mantis, and Dagger all have auto-aim mechanics, and Rocket Raccoon's healing orbs will automatically begin healing any teammates within 5 meters. Both auto-aim and AoE healing can be especially useful if you have a team of highly mobile teammates who never sit still for you to heal properly. Do you want to be able to help the team with putting in damage? Try playing Jeff the Landshark, Mantis, Adam Warlock, Rocket Raccoon, or Loki. With good self-sustain, primary fires that purely deal damage, and damage buffs, Jeff the Landshark, Mantis, and Adam Warlock all have kits that encourage them to focus more on playing as an off DPS for the team rather than spending the whole game focused purely on healing. Rocket does spend more of his time healing, but his primary fire is not too shabby, and his ultimate is able to give a 40% damage boost to the team. I would highly recommend combining his ult with high damage ults such as Namor's Whale to see some truly devastating results. As for Loki, when both of his clones are able to hit his target, his damage can be insanely high. Use it to follow up on your teammates' abilities such as Wolverine's Grab or Bucky's Hook for a quick and easy pick. Do you want to be able to burst heal? Try playing Adam Warlock, Luna Snow, Loki, or Jeff the Landshark. These heroes all have access to abilities that allow them to heal teammates incredibly quickly. Adam Warlock with his E, Luna Snow with her Shift and Idle Aura, Jeff with his Bubbles, and Loki with his Regeneration Domain. If you want to be able to prevent your team from dying when hit by a ton of damage all at once, these characters will be incredibly helpful for that. Do you want to have group heals? Try playing Adam Warlock, Cloak and Dagger, Invisible Woman, or Rocket Raccoon. Each of these heroes are able to heal multiple allies at once. Adam Warlock's E can heal up to 2 nearby allies. Cloak and Dagger's daggers will bounce to allies within a small range on hit. Invisible Woman's heals pierce allies and enemies alike, and Rocket Raccoon's orbs will automatically begin healing all allies around them. Do you want to be able to counter enemy ultimates without needing to use your own? Try playing Loki, Cloak and Dagger, Adam Warlock, Luna Snow, or Mantis. Each of these heroes can shut down many enemy ults without needing to invest an ult of their own. Since ultimates take much longer to charge when compared to other abilities, being able to cancel ults such as with Mantis' Sleep or Luna Snow's Freeze, neutralize ults such as with Loki's Regeneration Domain or Adam Warlock's Soulbond, or avoid ults such as with Cloak and Dagger's Dark Force Dimension provides incredible value for the team. Do you want to be able to deal with flyers? Try playing Adam Warlock, Luna Snow, or Cloak and Dagger. Adam Warlock and Luna Snow are both hit scan, meaning that the moment you click, damage will be registered on your target. If you can land your shots, these two can be great anti-air options. Cloak and Dagger's daggers lock onto targets, and while they don't do much damage, they can be just what you need to finish someone off who's escaping with 1 HP. Do you want to be able to deal with divers? Try playing Mantis, Invisible Woman, Rocket Raccoon, Loki, or Luna Snow. Mantis and Luna Snow are able to stun divers, allowing the team to follow up and help them, or for them to clean up the kill themselves. Invisible Woman has an incredible amount of utility at her fingertips that allows her to stop dives in many creative ways, but worst case scenario, her Veiled Step is a great repositioning tool. Similarly, Rocket can avoid divers by dashing all around before scurrying away up a wall, and Loki can simply swap away, turn invisible, or drop a regeneration domain on himself, making him practically unkillable. Do you want to be a menace to society? Jeff. You may have noticed that some characters showed up in many of the categories, while others were in very few. Please note that this is not because I heavily prefer one character over another, it's just because there's certain characters that fit nicely into many of these categories. For example, Adam Warlock shows up in 6 of these 8 categories I mentioned, but if we consider other elements of his kit, such as mobility or ability to consistently heal, he starts to struggle. There are a multitude of factors that go into who to play, such as map, team composition, or even the season's meta, and it's hard to cover all that nuance in an overview this broad. We'll go into these considerations more in the future with hero-specific guides. Besides the matter of their kits, another thing to consider about each hero is how difficult they are. We can do this by thinking about a character's skill floor and skill ceiling. Here is the definition of these terms that I will be using for this video. Skill floor refers to the minimum amount of experience required to be able to effectively play your character. A high skill floor means it takes a lot of experience to be effective, while a low skill floor means it can be effective almost right away. Skill ceiling refers to the maximum potential you can get out of playing a particular character. A high skill ceiling means there's a high amount of potential, while a low skill ceiling means there's less potential. The ceiling can also be different per player. For example, improving your aim will increase the skill ceiling on basically every character across the board for you. When learning Strategist for the first time, I would recommend playing a character with a lower skill floor such as Rocket Raccoon or Cloak and Dagger, as these will allow you to be effective in games while still learning the ins and outs of the role. As you start to progress and want to take on a greater challenge, I would pick up more complicated heroes with a higher skill floor such as Loki or Invisible Woman. These heroes will be much more difficult to be effective on, but once you master them, their potential is limitless. Of course, you're free to learn whoever you want in any order, but keep in mind that it'll feel like you have less impact at first when learning a character with a higher skill floor. For anyone that feels I missed something crucial, I want you to send a message in the comments and try and sell your main strategist to new players looking for their first character. Tell us why you chose to main that character and what some of their main strengths and weaknesses are. Hopefully by getting thoughts from a wide variety of people, new players get a better sense of which hero to pick up first. Now that you've picked your hero, let's talk about how you should be actually playing Strategist in your matches. There are thousands of decisions that each player makes every game, and the best way to master these decisions is just to play more games. But to help generalize your decisions and focus on more actionable advice, we're going to look at the match through the lens of the team fight. A team fight is simply any engagement where both entire teams are committing large amounts of resources to win control over a space. I'm going to try and explain what a strategist should be thinking about during any given team fight, but remember that with everything, team fights are incredibly situational. So while I can do my best to explain what to do generally, I'm not going to be able to give a one-size-fits-all sort of game plan. Your ability to formulate those plans and play the upcoming team fight accordingly is what distinguishes you as a good player. When we discuss team fights in a theoretical sense like this, we can split each one into 3 distinct phases. These are the pre-fight, mid-fight, and post-fight. These phases are constantly switching and blending into each other, so know that mid-game you probably won't be able to think about team fights in this way exactly, but it helps organize our thinking when looking at the game at this analytical level. The pre-fight is simply the time before a team fight begins. It's a calm before the storm sort of environment where both teams are fishing for any sort of advantage they can without overly committing anything of their own. While there are countless potential advantages a team could gain over the other, here's a list of some of the most impactful advantages both teams should be looking to gain during the pre-fight. A pick on the enemy team, ideally a strategist, a forced ultimate ability, a forced long cooldown ability, and valuable positions or control of space. This idea of maximizing advantages while minimizing disadvantages is what forms the basis of all later advice I give about positioning, cooldown management, team composition, etc. No matter what it is, it all boils down to how do I provide the most value to my team while giving up the least value to the other team? If your gameplay is yielding a net negative amount of value for your team, that means you're playing poorly and actively relying on the other members of your team to pick up the slack for you. If you're yielding a net positive amount of value, you're playing well. The more value you generate, the more you minimize the loss of value that your team creates through mistakes. This is how anyone, regardless of role, carries games. Not through getting the most kills or having the most healing or damage, but through generating so much value for the team that even if your teammates make big mistakes, you're there to cover for them. It just so happens to be that getting a kill is one of the biggest advantages that you can get, so most people tend to focus on that. All that aside, how do you focus on helping your team create advantages during the pre-fight as a strategist? The main thing you need to focus on is keeping yourself alive and using your abilities wisely. Any sort of pick before a team fight begins can be devastating, but losing a strategist early means that you might as well have already lost the fight. This is also true for each of your abilities. The reason why strategists are considered such high value targets is because their kits include the primary and most potent sources of sustain in the game. Abilities like Luna Snow's Shift, Cloak and Dagger's Bubble, or Loki's Regeneration Domain are all powerful tools to keep your team alive and should not be wasted. We'll go over in more detail what wasting an ability means in episode 4 of this series when we talk more about what cooldown management is. If you're forced to use high cooldown abilities such as your ult or the abilities mentioned previously during the pre-fight, it puts your team at a disadvantage as you won't have those abilities up to save you during the rest of the team fight. It allows the other team to slow down their play, wait for your ability to end, then engage while that ability is on cooldown. That being said, if you need to use an ability, please use that ability. Don't try to save it because you don't want to waste it. You might just let either you or a teammate get picked off. It's ideal that neither happens during the pre-fight, but being forced to pop a cooldown is way less detrimental to your team than letting someone die. Remember that as hard as your teammate is trying to get a pick or bait out an ability, the enemy team is trying the exact same thing. Sometimes the enemy bait just succeeds and you are forced to spend an ability at an inopportune time because the only other option is giving over a pick to the enemy team. Eventually, when one team lands a big enough advantage, either through landing a pick or two or baiting out key abilities, the team fight fully begins. The line between the pre-fight and the actual team fight, what we call the mid-fight, is blurred and impossible to clearly define, but you can usually tell when it starts because the attacking team will start invading the space of the defending team, using abilities as necessary to push the defenders back. Keep in mind that when I say attacking team or defending team, I don't necessarily mean the actual attackers or defenders of a map. I merely mean the team that is attempting to take space and the team that is attempting to hold that space. Over the course of one round, you will find yourself being both an attacker and defender. For example, if your team is pushing the payload and the enemy team has shown up to get you off the payload, they become the attacking team even though they are technically on defense. Your goal is to be playing defense as much as possible because it allows you to use your abilities reactively, only needing to spend them to counter enemy abilities rather than being forced to use them to create space or secure picks. Side tangent aside, during the mid-fight, your priorities as a strategist don't really change. You want to stay alive and use your abilities wisely to keep your teammates alive. There's a lot of micro decisions you need to make during the teamfight to achieve victory, but I plan to discuss those in more specific detail in the future when we discuss target prioritization and positioning. For this episode, I wanted to just focus on one of the most important decisions you make during the course of a teamfight: when do I ult? In general, and I'd say this goes for any character on any role, you want your ultimate to be activated at a time so critical it forces the enemy team to activate an ult of their own or risk losing the team fight. Oftentimes, the winner of a team fight is determined by who is able to have the first undefended and impactful ultimate. I say impactful because even if the enemy's team doesn't have an ult up to stop, say, your team's Punisher ult, that Punisher ult won't mean much if he's not able to hit his shots and get picks. Understanding that, it becomes fairly clear what we should be using our defensive ults for as strategists in most scenarios: countering enemy ults. I want to acknowledge the fact that there are other uses for defensive ults other than just countering an ult. For example, Cloak and Dagger's ult can be highly effective in taking space, and Invisible Woman's ult can be used to hide the locations of your team's other ults. That being said, the bread and butter of defensive ults is to defend against offensive ones. While you might be able to gain value through using your ult in another way, you have practically a guaranteed chance of generating value if you use your ult to counter. This all seems easy enough, but in game, it can still be hard to know exactly when to pop your ultimate. After all, the enemy team probably knows that you want to counter their ult, so their best course of action is to focus you down with their ult and take you down before you have a chance to react with your own. Luckily for you, there's a skill that you can work on to be able to gain a sort of ultimate ability spidey sense that will allow you to know which ults are coming before the fight even begins. That skill is ult tracking. Ult tracking is not an exact science unless you're some sort of supercomputer, but in general, it's the ability to roughly know when your opponents have their ults ready to use in the next fight. You're never going to be able to know exactly the percentage, but over time, you'll be able to develop a scale of, nah, they don't have ult, to, maybe they have ult, to, they definitely have ult. Now, keeping track of all 6 enemy ults might seem hard, and it is. So don't. At least, not at first. Start by tracking either your mirror on the other team or the biggest offensive ult you're looking to counter ult. By focusing on just 1 or 2 ults, you can much more consistently track them throughout the game. To know who to identify as the biggest offensive ult you want to counter, try and think about who would be able to do the most amount of damage if left unchecked. These are typically ults like Doctor Strange, Storm, Star-Lord, or Psylocke. They're incredibly hard to survive with a defensive ult, so you need to be ready to counter them. Also, consider ults designed to counter you. If you're Cloak and Dagger or Invisible Woman, you need to be keeping track of Magneto's ult, because you'll almost always be looking to use his ult to cancel yours. No matter the situation, you want to know what ults on the enemy team are the most likely to wipe out your team, then put an active effort into keeping track of those ults. In order to successfully do this, you must understand how long it takes for the ult you want to track to charge. You gain this experience fastest by playing as that character and learning firsthand how long it usually takes to build their ult, but the slower and more painful method is to get ulted by them over and over again until you learn how fast their ult charges. As a general rule of thumb, every hero in the game will ult once every 2 or 3 fights, so if you haven't seen an ult in a while, you can assume that it's probably coming soon. Some heroes, like Moon Knight or Cloak and Dagger, can also build their ults absurdly fast, so be sure to account for the different speeds each ult can be built. As you master the art of ult tracking, the most important thing to bear in mind is that enemy ult cooldowns are not random. They have to charge just the same as you do. Sometimes, the enemy team really does just get the better of you and builds their ult way faster than expected, but if ults always feel like they're being used when you didn't know they had them, it's time to start working on your ult tracking. So now we know that defensive ult should be used to counter, but what about the other strategist ults? Adam Warlock's ultimate can be incredibly powerful, as it nullifies the disadvantage that comes with having teammates get picked off early. But keep in mind that this ability is not a redo button for the teamfight. Every ally is rezzed with a measly 100 HP, so if anyone on the enemy team is able to find Adam while he's ulting, his whole team is as good as dead. Instead of looking to res your entire team at once, try rezzing the first 1 or 2 people that die in a teamfight. This will allow you to end your numbers disadvantage for the teamfight and have the rest of your team alive to protect your newly resurrected teammates while they recover to full strength. Losing 1 or 2 people makes it almost impossible to win a teamfight, so rezzing just a few members of your team can be just as effective as rezzing everyone at once. I see too many Adam players holding this ult for the perfect moment just for it to never come. As for Rocket, his ult charges quickly, so I would recommend using it to combo with any DPS or tank ult to enhance that ult's damage output. If you just chuck this ult out randomly during a teamfight, it's sort of a 50-50 toss-up whether or not it will actually be useful to the team. But saving it to combo with someone else, you can almost guarantee that the ult you comboed will be supercharged and obliterate the enemy team. As for Jeff, keep in mind that he's my least played strategist, so my advice about his best use case is mostly theory on my part, but Jeff can be absolutely incredible for clearing enemies out of a choke or off an objective. Throwing a whole team off a cliff is nice, but even just taking a couple members out of the teamfight for a few seconds lets your team come in and take the advantage. Don't use this ult to open the fight, as the enemy team will be able to focus you down. Instead, take advantage of the chaos that occurs later in the fight and sneak in to steal a few enemies right when they least expect it. This is especially useful in overtime when the enemy team needs to be on the objective, but make sure you don't eat your teammates so they can still cap the point. If you're a Jeff player, feel free to chime in with corrections in the comments. I'll try to pin any good answers I see. As Loki, the decision of who you try to ult is very situational, but it largely comes down to a question of opportunity cost. If you choose to take a DPS ult or tank ult, your team is now down on support for at least the next 15 seconds. Is that something your team can handle? Maybe you have 3 supports, or your other team is a main healer with ult up. If that's the case, then you can feel more open to take an offensive ult and put in damage. But if you're down a support already, or playing with an off healer who will struggle to heal alone, by duplicating an offensive ult rather than a defensive one, you'll be putting in 0 heals during your ult, which could nullify any potential benefits gained from duplicating the offensive ult. And sometimes, you still know that you weren't aiming for, and in that case, do what you can, try not to die. As the teamfight progresses and more ults are used, eventually one team will start gaining a significant advantage. Either the attackers will successfully force the defenders out of their space, or the defenders will be able to hold on to it, which brings us to the post-fight. You might think that after a team fight ends, all you have to do is wait for the next one to begin, but there's a lot more to it than that. There are many small things you can do during the post-fight to set yourself up for the success in your next team fight. If your team lost the team fight, do not trickle. This is probably the biggest thing that screws with uncoordinated teams, especially on game modes like Domination. Trickling is when a few people die early on in a team fight, and instead of waiting for the team to have a chance to regroup, they run back into the front line as soon as they respawn, even if the team fight has already been lost in the meantime. Typically, they end up dying again, which means that the team now has to wait another 12 seconds for them to respawn before they can start a new team fight as a whole group. If during that time, their teammates get impatient, walk in, and die, well, now that cycle is repeated and the team is officially trickling. They're caught in a terrible loop where everyone just keeps walking in and dying over and over again at separate timings, while the other team gets to win easy fights over and over again due to the numbers advantage. If you run in by yourself, you should almost never expect to be able to get anything done, especially as a support. The best thing you can do when you respawn early is to stop, take a position far enough away that no one on the enemy team can attack you, and wait until you can regroup with the rest of your team. The flip side of trickling is staggering. Now, instead of being the first one to die in the team fight, you're one of the last. In this situation, you're once again engaging in a fight with a huge numbers disadvantage. If you know the fight is lost, the best thing you can do is die quickly or escape so your team can regroup as soon as possible. That being said, the absolute worst thing you can do is barely survive a fight, try to preserve your KDA and attempt to escape just to eventually die anyway. If you're going to try and escape, you need to be 100% certain that you can actually get out. Otherwise, not only did you not make it out, but you've now wasted a considerable amount of your team's time. Since your goal as a strategist is to stay alive as long as possible, you'll typically need to be more aware of staggering yourself rather than trickling, but keep in mind that avoiding both is important. Remember, Marvel Rivals is a team game. If you don't have all 6 members of your team alive and participating in each team fight, you're going to find it much harder to win games. Those games where you feel like your team can never do anything, it's probably because you're having someone get picked off before the team's able to commit to the team fight, resulting in every team fight being taken at a disadvantage. As soon as it becomes obvious that the team fight is lost, your team needs to regroup as soon as humanly possible. The faster you disengage from the fight and reset, the more time you save and the more chances you have to try again with the full team. So now that we understand that the biggest thing to do if you lose a team fight is to just regroup, what should you do when you win a team fight? One thing you can look to do is to maximize the stagger on one of your opponents. This can be a little cruel, but if the team fight is won and your last enemy isn't actively stopping you from completing the objective, the longer you spend taking them out, the longer the other team needs to spend waiting for them to respawn. Just remember, you don't want to let them somehow find a way to escape or otherwise turn the fight back around on you. Just delay their death for a few moments, then finish them off. Every second counts, and just by waiting those few extra moments to send them back to spawn, you're increasing the chance that the enemy team decides to trickle instead of being patient and regrouping. If everyone on the enemy team has already been dealt with, the next thing you should look to do is rotate to optimal positions. This usually means getting behind good cover, getting somewhere up high, or otherwise just making sure you're in a safe spot. This will increase your chances of winning the next team fight, as it will force the enemy team to get you out of your protected position before they have a chance at taking you out. I will discuss more about how to find safe spots in episode 4 of the series when we talk more about positioning. Whether you win or lose the team fight, the post fight is also a good opportunity to reflect on the previous fight. Who used what ultimates? Did your team comp work, or did it feel like something was missing? Share information with your team and come up with a plan on how you're going to win the next fight. Before you know it, the next team fight will start brewing again, and the cycle begins anew until either side takes victory. There's obviously a lot more to discuss, but I hope this gives you a general sense of what your role as a strategist is during a team fight. If you're still confused or just want more specific advice, I'm now doing VOD reviews. I'm offering free VOD reviews to the first 50 people who sign up for them using the Google form on my Discord server, so go check that out if you're interested. Link to the server is in the description. Thank you all for so much support on the last video. It really inspires me to keep going with this channel and work hard to keep pumping out high quality content to share what I know about the strategist role. If you'd like to support my efforts, check out my Ko-Fi. I accept one-time donations, or I'm offering some fun benefits to those who choose to support me on a monthly basis. Speaking of which, thank you to Schmorn and Spleen for being my first 2 tier 3 supporters. Y'all are amazing. That's all I have for today though. If you're on the Discord server or on stream, I'll talk to you soon. Otherwise, see y'all in the next video.